So enjoy, have fun, and now, Yuval, the stage is yours.
Wow, after this embarrassing
Woohoo!
picture, it's really, really hard to top it. But I'll try. So, this presentation is really, really exciting and really cool. When Liran talked to me about it, I was really excited, but then I also became a little bit nervous because it's something that I've never really done. Like I did NBA presentations to NBA people, and I've done data presentations to data people, but I've never done the cross between them, like NBA presentations to data people. So it made me a little bit nervous, and still is actually. But before I tell you how I tackled this anxiety, I think it's best to give you like a little bit of a background about myself. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Yuval. I'm a data analyst here at Wix for 2.5 years. I was at the premium services company, and now I'm a growth analyst at the management BA team. But I also have an alter ego. And in that alter ego, I have a blog about the NBA, which is live for the past 9 years. And I wrote there over 600 blog posts. I have over 4,000 followers on Facebook and almost 2,000 followers on Twitter. And I wrote for Walla Sport, which is one of the biggest content websites in Israel, for like 5 years. And I record podcasts with Any Given Day, which is the largest sports podcast in Israel. And last year, I wrote 2 chapters about in a book that was published about the NBA season. So at this point, I could just let my alter ego take over completely on this conversation and talk to you about LeBron James or how Michael Jordan is the greatest player of all time and stuff like that. And I'm sure for some of you it will be interesting, but I'm not sure if it will be interesting to everyone. So I wanted to talk about the NBA in a way that will be meaningful for someone who is not a diehard fan of Kobe Bryant and is not familiar with the league and the game, and that's really what I wanted to talk about. So when I came to think about it, the best way I thought to talk about the NBA is to show it to you through my perspective and share with you my journey around it and how I became so obsessed about it and opened the blog and everything. So this is my NBA obsession meter. It starts when I was really young. When I was like 6 or 7, I was waking up in the morning to watch Michael Jordan play, and ever since I was hooked by the NBA, and I watched the games and followed the league with Shaquille O'Neal and Allen Iverson and all those people. But really, when I started to learn at the university, I was learning to be an accountant, and my life was pretty miserable and boring. That's really when my obsession kicked in and reached the maximum amount. My life was pretty boring at the time, and I was looking to escape, to run away, and I ran away as far as I could to the other side of the globe to watch a game that is being played when everyone is asleep. So at that time, I was just watching a lot of games. I had a League Pass subscription, which allows you to watch the games anytime you want. And I was reading all the articles and stuff like that. And I had a lot of thoughts about the NBA. And I didn't have anyone to share them with. And I usually would talk about it with my brother. But it was getting to be a little bit too much for him as well. So at one point, he just said to me, "Why don't you open a blog and write about it?" And I said, like the same answer that I gave Liran when he asked me to do this presentation. I said, "Why not?" And I started to write. And this is actually my first blog post from 2012, almost 9 years ago. It was on WordPress at the time. And I started to publish my blog in some weird corners of the internet, and it started to get some readers. And it was pretty fun. I got like 40 or 50 readers. It was super fun, super satisfying to get readers and to create something and for people to value it and cherish it and read it. But I wasn't sure that my early success was sustainable. Like I was relying heavily on my writing skills and my obsession with the NBA, and I wasn't sure if it was enough to really keep it going. So I had to. Those were the 2 pillars at the beginning, like my writing skills and my obsession. That was what the blog was based on. But I had to ask myself 2 questions. Like, how am I going to keep my current readers? And how am I going to reach out to new readers? So let's translate it to a Wix language. It's how am I going to increase retention and how am I going to increase conversion? So the answer that I answered myself was that I had to keep producing great and interesting content on a regular basis. And it's something that I couldn't do with just my writing skills and my obsession with the NBA, because at the end of the day, I would run out of stories to tell. So I had to find something that will help me generate stories. And I couldn't just write 2 or 3 blog posts a week just on just based on what I had. I had to find something else. So that's really when I discovered data. And I wasn't a data analyst at the time, but I started to go through all the sites, and the NBA has really, really great stat sites. They're all public and they're all very, very good. They capture almost every aspect of the game. You have traditional stats like points and rebounds, and you have advanced stats like usage and stuff like that, like how many possessions a player has out of the entire possessions. And there's like millions of stuff like that, and really, really great stat sites, and they're really like it's all public and you can use it. So you can ask yourself at this point, like, why does the NBA has such great stat sites, and why is it all public? So the short answer is that NBA fans are geeks and they love stats. The longer answer is that the NBA is unique because it's a sport that is deeply influenced by statistics. So I don't have enough time to go too deeply into the analytics revolution that happened in the NBA in the last 20 years. But I think the main thing that you need to know is that NBA is really influenced by statistics. And the primary example that I can give you is that how expectancy and expected value really change the way the game is played. So for those of you who don't know, this is how an NBA court looks like. And you have a semicircle around the rim. And if you shoot within the semicircle, you get 2 points. If you shoot outside of the semicircle, you had 3 points. And traditionally, most of the shots came within the semicircle near the rim because those are the highest percentage shots. But when the idea of expectancy and expected value started to circulate around the league, you started to see more and more teams understand that in the long term, the expected value of a 3-point shot that goes in 33% of the time is the same as a 2-point shot that goes in 50% of the time. So more and more teams started to desert the less effective areas of the 2-point shot and replace them with 3-point shots. So how it looks in a graph, this is a graph of the 3-point shots as a percentage of all shots by season. So you can see it starts in 2002. The 3-point shot was less than 20% of all shots in the NBA at that time. And that's really when at that time, when the pioneers of the analytics revolution, like Daryl Morey and Mike Zern, started to get jobs in the NBA. And you started to have more and more teams like implement statistical ideas. And you started to see a little bit of an increase in those years. And as those teams were getting success, more and more teams were imitating them. And in the past 10 years, there's been like a huge spike. And today, almost 40% of the shots in the NBA are 3-point shots. So you can really see it here. On the left side, you see the top 200 shot locations in 2002 and in 2020, and on the right side in 2020. So you can see in 2002, the shots are scattered all over the court. But in 2020, it's really concentrated on the places where the expected value is the highest, like near the rim and around the 3-pointer. And everything in between is dead, is not existent. So this is just one example of how statistics influence the NBA and how the game is played. And if I'm coming back to me and my journey, this really enabled the NBA to have really, really great data and really, really great stat sites that are public and shareable. So for me, it was amazing. I was able to use this data and to use it in my stories and tell stories that are based on data, that are rooted in numbers. And it really became the third pillar for my blog, for my success. And I'm saying success like in niche basketball terms, niche basketball writing terms, I mean. So it was really, really great for me because I was able to not only rely on my writing skills or my obsession, I was also able to implement data into my stories, into my blog post. It became more interesting and more rich and got me more followers and more traffic. But you're the last one I should lecture to on the power of data. Like everyone knows this. This is not something that is new, especially here. I think what is more interesting to discuss is once you understand the power of data, how do you implement it? How do you use it and when? So in my view, there are two ways to use data in the NBA. One of them is the analytical approach, which says first you look at the stats, you go over the stat sheet, then you filter the noise, and then you watch the games, and you know what to focus on. That's, I call it the top-down approach. Like first you look at the stats. It's much easier to look at the stats, find out what you're looking for, and then watch the games. And the other approach, which is what I was implementing in the early days of the blog, is first you watch the games, you come up with questions, and then you look at the stats. Like first you watch the games with a critical eye, with no numbers or stats in your brain, and then you come up with questions, and then you go and look at the stats to validate what you saw. I call it the bottom-up approach. So what's the difference? Actually, I'll get to it in a few seconds, but I want to give you an example that really illustrates the difference. So in 2013, I was watching a lot of Indiana Pacers games, and there was a player in Indiana that's called Paul George, and he was playing really good. I was watching them, and he was playing really, really good. And he wasn't a well-known player at the time. He had only like 12 points per game in the previous season. But I could see that he was developing into something special. And then I was going to look at his stats, and while they weren't like eye-popping, they weren't really crazy numbers, it was still enough to validate what I was seeing. And I wrote in January 2013, I wrote a blog post about Paul George and said, he's the next big thing in the NBA. And later that season, more and more people started to see it, and he was voted the most improved player in the NBA. And later that season in the playoffs, he did this.
Raise hand who pretending he understands something.
Okay. So for those of you who don't know, the guy that fist bumped him at the end was LeBron James. He's the best player in the league right now. So that really, I wasn't able to know that Paul George was a special player if I wasn't using the bottom-up approach, if I wasn't watching the games before, because if I was only looking at the numbers, I wouldn't have known that. So basically, both approaches, they say that you should look at the stats and you should watch the games. The difference is what you do first and the weight that you put on, what weight do you put on it. So the top-down approach, I'm just going to go over quickly on the pros and cons. It's easier to implement. It filters the noise much better, and it's a lot more effective. It's much easier to analyze a stat sheet than to watch 48 minutes of a basketball game. But on the other hand, the top-down approach will always be one step behind the bottom-up approach, because the bottom-up people will always identify trends before the top-down people. The top-down people would have never known that Paul George had become a special player in January 2013 because the numbers didn't say it. On the other hand, the bottom-up people will always see that a player is developing into something special before the numbers will say it. They see things with a naked eye. They see stories the numbers can't tell. It's true that the top-down approach filters the noise, and it's great, but sometimes it also filters out some of the special sounds that algorithms and models just can't identify. The downside with the bottom-up approach is that it's time-consuming, and it also can lead you to places that are not very interesting, and that's a very important factor to consider. When I analyze data about the NBA, I usually use the bottom-up approach. But when I did a career change and I became a data analyst myself, and I left the accounting firms, I was just overwhelmed by the amount of data and the size of it. And I understood that there's no way I can do this approach without using the top-down approach. I can do this job without using the top-down approach. But I also understood that I can bring a lot of value if I implement the bottom-up approach, like if I watch the games, if I put it in quotations. So I understood that if I wanted to bring added value besides the regular duties of a data analyst, I have to watch the games and experience this product and feel it. So I'll give you an example. So I was helping a friend build a website, and we edit the website in the editor for desktop, and then we realized, wait, we didn't edit it for mobile. And I started to think, wait, if I missed it, probably most of our users are missing it as well. And then I started to a deeper research that we're now doing, and maybe we can talk about it in a different Guild Day. But the main thing that I'm trying to say to you is that I was able to understand the gaps in our product in a better way because I was watching the games and I was implementing the bottom-up approach. I was not only looking at the numbers, I was also experiencing the product and coming up with questions that are not only based on the numbers that I was seeing. So to summarize, really blogging about the NBA showed me how much power data has, and it also helped me become a better analyst because I was implementing the way I was analyzing my blog post and researching for my blog post. I was implementing that way into how I was doing things here at Wix. And the balance between the top-down and the bottom-up approach really made me a better analyst, in my view. But the main thing, and it's really hard, before I get to the main thing, I think it's not easy to blend between those two, to balance between the two. It requires us to take some time out of our day-to-day routines and to look at things a little bit differently. But I think it's really, really important, and it really can help you become a better analyst. It can help you understand the product in a better way, understand the users, and at the end of the day, help Wix, which is our goal at the end of the day. But the main thing that I want to really talk about and to say, I think the main conclusion from what I was saying is that you should nurture your hobbies. Like, you can never know where they will lead you. And I certainly didn't know when I started to blog about the NBA that I would fall in love with data and become an analyst myself. But I'll never regret it. And that's pretty much it. You have, like, here you have links to the blog and to the Facebook page and to Twitter if you want to follow or to just check it out. And I'm here if you have any questions, and if you want to talk hoops, feel free.
Good job.
Nice.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Yuval,
Thank you.
you're a rock star.
Amazing.